with some beef shank, variety of spices, green pepper, white onion, some diced tomato, and we're going to finish it off with some gnocchi that we happen to have lying in the freezer. To give a little twist to it, we're also going to put in some red curry paste and see what happens. So, in here, I am mixing up some onion powder, some garlic powder, some some whole chilies, and then I'm going to throw in a little bit of oregano, a little bit of paprika. I usually do 1 to 2 teaspoons of everything. I might adjust it later on depending on what I'm feeling. I've also got 4 sprigs of fresh thyme that are going to go into it once I'm ready to start cooking off the heat. Alright, now that I've got my spices blended and the thyme is just about plucked, I'm going to go ahead and start cutting up our pepper, onion, and we'll start rubbing the beef. When cutting these, I'm going to go for about a medium dice. Nothing too big, but you are going to be cooking them down a little bit. So you want them big enough that when they do get smaller, when they do shrink up, you're still going to have a nice sized piece to bite into. And I'm using a white onion. You can go any onion really. I like the whites, and just gonna give it a nice balance to everything else that's in the soup. Now for the peppers, we are gonna cut those a little bit smaller. They're not gonna shrink up as much as the onions will in the cooking. So we are gonna want them to be closer to the same size the onions will be after they've been sauteed and cooked down. But because we're opting to use the beef shins today instead of a different cut of meat, we're going to get a little bit of the richness from the bones. I'm going to give it some nice browning before adding everything else. That and then the curry paste is going in. It's going to kind of update a little bit. We're using gnocchi. You could go without. You could use any other kind of pasta. We just happen to have some really good gnocchi that was made fresh, hiding out in our freezer. So I've got my beef shin. Before dressing it with the spices and the oil and everything, I'm going to go ahead and score the top a little bit. When it starts to get crispy and brown, the little fatty bits, they'll help separate, they'll give some extra flavor, they'll expose the meat underneath, and that'll also make sure that it is a little bit more tender. You see, I'm not going too deep into it. I'm just cutting just slightly into the surface of the skin, into the surface of those fatty bits. Enough to expose meat underneath, but not enough to really cut into the meat underneath. And now that we're ready to start seasoning our beef, I'm going to go ahead and turn the pan on. Want to make sure that it gets really smoking hot. In here I've got a couple of tablespoons of a chili infused safflower oil, peanut oil, plain safflower oil, anything like that will work fine. This was, I bought a good amount of oil and brought it up to when it was almost smoking, threw in a whole bunch of chilies, and I just kept on taking the chilies out every few weeks, putting in new ones. So it does have a little bit of a kick to it. One of the good things about this oil, it has such a high smoking point, so when it can hold up even at even when it's way up there. Whereas something like a corn oil, it has a lower temp, it'll be more likely to burn a lot faster. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and dress the shins. I'm dressing it with a little bit of a vegetable oil. This way when everything goes into the pan, these won't rub off and they'll really get themselves into the meat. Make sure I get a little bit over every piece. Not going to let those bits in the bowl go to waste. You rub them right in. So now we're going to go ahead and wait a minute or two, and once our pot is at a good smoking heat, we're going to go and throw in the beef skin side down and leave it in there for about 5 minutes or so until it gets a nice crispy, medium brown, crunchy bit about it. At this point, the oil is nice and hot. You can hear that sizzle when the meat goes in. Make sure, get skin side down. And it looks like they're going to take up all the space inside the pot, but remember, they will shrink down a little bit, so the meat will start to fall off the bone. So it's going to not take up as much space as you think. Alright, so 5 minutes have passed. As you can see, the got a really good sear on it. The skin is nice and crunchy. Everything is split open well. There's still some nice browning in the meat right beneath the skin. Now we're going to go ahead and leave it like this for another 3 minutes. Take it out of the pan and start cooking the vegetables. Alright, well, this has been sitting here for a couple minutes. So you've also got a nice little bit of crispiness around the edge of the bottom. Go ahead and transfer them back to our big old cutting board. Alright, so at this point we're going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of some red curry paste. And just a splash of some vegetable oil. We're going to do this to deglaze the pan, get up any of the little crispy bits. Now we're going to throw in our onions. And that bit of thyme. And give this a quick stir. And lower the heat to about medium or so. Alright, so you see I'm stirring around my onions a little bit. The edges have started to get slightly brown, and they are a little bit softer. Now we're going to go ahead and add that green pepper we diced up. And this we will be cooking for about 2 minutes or so, stirring occasionally. We're going to look to see the pepper getting to about the same condition the onion is now. Alright, so as you can see, the peppers are slightly brown on the edges. So now we're going to go ahead and add 1 can of some diced tomatoes. We have the kind that has some garlic and onion, but those flavors will go with everything else. So we're going to go ahead and give that a mix and let that sit for about 2 minutes. We're going to let those cook down, wait until they've got a slightly pasty, thicker consistency. If you look in, you can see that everything has thickened up a little bit. We've left this cooking for a few minutes. Now, we're going to add in our shins. We're going to go ahead and top it off with the rest of our vegetable broth. We'll be having just enough in there to come right above the edge of the skin. And lastly, we're going to add a couple of pretty good pinches of salt. Give that a little bit of a stir. We're going to raise the heat until it starts simmering. Then we'll lower it back down to about medium or so. We'll just kind of forget about it for a couple hours.
So what's in there?
In here, I'm melting down a couple tablespoons of bacon fat, some more of the red curry paste, paprika, and garlic powder. I'm going to go ahead and saute the gnocchi in this to give a little bit of extra something.
How long has the soup been cooking for?
Right now we're looking at about almost 3 hours. This is definitely something you're not going to come home at 5 o'clock and whip up. This is something you can just slowly let it do its thing.